Tonight on Firstline, tariffs, Trump and turbulence. Australians react with fury and disappointment as America slaps tariffs on Australian exports. How will this affect our farmers and what can be done to mitigate any effects? We hear from member for New England Barnaby Joyce, but his solution for assistance has been slammed from his Labor rival Laura Hughes. Meanwhile, what is the relationship between Australia and the United States? A political expert explains her analysis. Meanwhile, an independent candidate for New England offers a passionate view on the environment and employment, but her Facebook posts have proven to be a problem. And the federal government pitches its plan to regional New South Wales. However, is it enough to swing voters in die-hard Nationals territory?
This is Firstline with Daniel Pizarro.
Good evening. Australia must now deal with a 10% tariff by US President Donald Trump, a move which wiped off trillions from the US stock market, as well as seeing financial markets across the world tumble. Each country has a different tariff rate against them, and there's fears America might fall into a recession, which could spread across the world. Here in the New England, there's uncertainty from cattle producers about how their exports to America will be affected. Member for New England, Barnaby Joyce, has called for our domestic market to be strengthened.
All we can do is how we manage this domestically. That is our only way of mitigating the circumstances which are now apparent in Australia with tariffs coming on beef. Now down there, just down there, is Meatworks, and over there is Thomas Foods, another Meatworks, and out there is chickens. So we've got cattle, we've got sheep, we've got chickens, we've got processing. When Tamworth processes, Australia eats. We're a big part, but not the only part, we're a big part of providing the food that goes onto the shelves. And that processing of food is now going to be affected by tariffs. It affects the whole industry because it affects the returns going back. So what can Australia do? What can we do?
The double whammy of tariffs during a federal election campaign has caused ripples through both major parties, and it once again comes into question what exactly is the relationship between Australia and the United States, especially when you have a president like Donald Trump. Joining me now from Armidale is University of New England lecturer and expert on Australian foreign policy, international relations and security, Karin from Strokirch. She also co-edited the Routledge Handbook of Populism in the Asia Pacific. Well, Dr. von Strokirch, thank you so much for joining me. This election campaign has certainly been upended at the end of the first week with these big tariffs that have been announced by Donald Trump. From what I'm looking at the moment, farmers are particularly wanting to do a call to arms, a call to action for everyone to buy Australian to mitigate a lot of these impacts that tariffs could potentially have, as well as stave off any American pressure. What's your take on what's recently happened?
The 10% tariffs that are being imposed by the United States on Australian exports are probably not the main concern. Many other countries have been harder hit with tariffs of up to 50% in some cases. And it doesn't mean that Americans will stop buying Australian products because they need our products. For example, Australian beef. The US has been going through a drought and they've had a beef shortage. So if they don't buy Australian beef, they won't have enough beef for their consumer demand. So the real price of the Australian tariffs will immediately be borne by the American consumer, who will have to pay more for everything from Big Mac burgers to all other consumer items that are imported from overseas. But for Australia, a more serious concern is the indirect effect of these tariffs on other trading partners of Australia and the global economy as a whole. For example, the US is putting much higher tariffs on China, India, and countries in Southeast Asia that we have a lot of trade with. And if their economies slowed down due to this trade war with the United States, that will affect their demand for Australian exports as well. So there'll be like a contagion effect out from the US to the global economy that will have more serious ramifications for Australia.
And I know that dreaded R word has been battered about, recession, which is a major issue. If we have a global recession all due to America, the repercussions of that, given that we've just recovered from the COVID-19 pandemic, and before that we were still going through the after effects of the global financial crisis, and you can even go back even further, the dot-com bubble burst of the early 2000s, a lot of these events certainly make a lot of people very nervous. And if we have a recession and we know the exact cause being Donald Trump and these tariffs, I mean, America's standing on the world, which has been on very shaky ground recently, it probably will absolutely collapse even further.
Yeah. Well, the extent of US tariffs on all its global trading partners is very likely to precipitate a recession in the United States in the first instance. And then because the United States is such a major trading partner for the rest of the world, that's going to damage other economies around the world and potentially cause recession elsewhere, as you said. Yeah.
And what do you think at the moment is your biggest concern from a more regional level? We have the farmers, the cattle industry of the New England Northwest, who are, of course, bracing for these tariffs and have gone through a lot of challenges over the past couple of years. And we know, as you've mentioned, that American consumers will be affected quite brutally by these tariffs. But what about on a local level here? How will the farmers be faring?
First, I should clarify something that Trump said yesterday that muddied the waters considerably here in Australia. He said that he was going to impose a ban on Australian beef and that America was going to stop buying it altogether. And he said that he was going to do that because Australia effectively has a ban on American beef coming here for biosecurity reasons, which he found not very persuasive. And that's to do with our concerns about mad cow disease and keeping that out of Australia. And the issue is that in the United States cattle bred in America do not have mad cow disease. They've been pretty good at managing that for a long time now. I think the last case was 20 years ago or something. But the US doesn't have good controls on meat coming in from elsewhere, like Mexico, which is not so reliable. And that's why Australia is still keeping out American beef imports. But what Donald Trump said was apparently something he said off the cuff, and it wasn't official American policy. So he hasn't banned Australian beef. There is no direct measure against Australian beef. So all the cattle farmers in our New England area and around the rest of Australia have to worry about for the moment is the 10% tariff. Australian beef is not facing any more restrictions than all other goods that we export to America that are facing that 10% tariff.
And funnily enough, I was looking at the list of all the tariff figures against each country, and funnily enough, of course, infamously, Norfolk Island faces a 29% tariff, even though that's part of New South Wales. It's no longer a self-governing territory, and even in fact, we've had like our uninhabited islands closer to Antarctica be slapped with even further tariffs. I mean, I don't think the penguins are really going to be pleased about that, or maybe they won't even care.
I think more likely that they won't care. No, it's very curious, and some of, I mean, that's just a nonsense. But some of the other countries that have been subjected to very high tariffs, it really makes you wonder what's going on. Like Lesotho, which is a landlocked, tiny nation within South Africa, and they're facing, I think, 50% tariffs. And it's a very small economy that has very little trade to speak of with the US in any case, but it's based solely on the size of the deficit. This is how the Trump administration is determining how high tariffs should be against other countries. It's in direct relation to the proportion of the deficit that America is experiencing with that country, even though in volume terms it's negligible. They're just going on percentages. So
I think this is also one of those dreaded things about populism as well. We know Donald Trump, of course, has been quite an infamous populist, and a lot of people have certainly been taken in by what he has been saying with the Make America Great Again mantra that he has done for many, many years. But when you're looking at it, during his time in office, we had very poor economic growth that had to be recovered during the Biden years. And then regardless of what has been happening with all the job losses in the public sector recently, many are just still blaming Democrats or the deep state or other factors. They're not blaming the president himself, who is in some ways unilaterally making all these decisions or suggestions, regardless of how legal or how probable they are. And in turn, that's making our relationship with the United States even more erratic, because we're dealing with a US president who is extremely erratic, and he knows he's trying to muddle up the waters and try to get the best possible deal for himself. Really, that's the kind of take that I'm seeing with a lot of people. What's your take?
Well, there were a few parts to that question. Yes, it's true that roughly half the people who voted in the US were taken in by Donald Trump's populist charms during the election campaign and voted accordingly. We're only a few months into his second term, so it may be too early to say that the people who voted for him are going to remain loyal and continue to be fooled by his theatrics and accusations blaming others. I think my understanding is that his popularity is already going down in opinion polls, and I would expect that to continue because, as we discussed earlier, the trade war that President Trump's administration has instigated is going to punish the American consumers first and foremost, and it will drag on for a long time. It won't just be a flash in the pan like he and his sidekicks are suggesting. It's going to have very long-term damaging effects on the economy, on working people. And as for Australia, well, yes, Donald Trump is notoriously difficult to deal with. He's unpredictable. He's on a personal leader-to-leader level. One doesn't know how he will behave. It doesn't surprise me that Anthony Albanese hasn't picked up the phone and rung Donald Trump, because look what happened when Malcolm Turnbull did that in his first term of office. Didn't go well for Turnbull at all. And so I think Albanese's taking a small target approach with Trump, that he's being restrained in criticism of him. He has criticized the tariffs, as has Peter Dutton, but Albanese is careful not to say anything personally derogatory about Trump that might alienate him from Albanese and damage our national interest.
So, Doctor, when I was looking at Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's press conference this week, he made those subtle mentions that this is not what friends do, referring to the tariffs with America. But he also said that he wouldn't rule out maybe taking legal actions through the World Trade Organization. Is that a potentially viable option for Australia to go through?
Well, it's an option, and it's one Australia should pursue, and other trading partners of the United States can pursue as well. But the problem with the US is that it has basically turned its back on many international institutions, and the World Trade Organization is one of them. And the unfortunate reality of realpolitik, as it's called, is that the powerful do as they choose. And if Trump's America thumbs its nose at the World Trade Organization, there may not be a lot that can be done about that. But it does help if all the trading partners behave in a similar manner and speak with one voice. So at least then you have strength in numbers in critiquing United States policy and calling for those tariffs to be removed.
It's interesting that when you're also comparing what's happening in Canada at the moment, their new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has really taken this strongman, like, I stand with Canada, we're not going to buckle under any American pressure. And then the main opposition, the Conservative Party with Pierre Bolivar, he was originally riding very high in the opinion polls and looked like he was going to win the next federal election. But as soon as Justin Trudeau announced he was stepping down, Mark Carney won the leadership of the Liberal Party in a landslide and took this very strong action against the American government, as well as the fact that the Conservatives were seen as being way more politically aligned with the Republicans and Donald Trump. This has completely overturned what people would be thinking, what would be happening in Canada. And I think to a degree we're seeing that also here in Australia, because Peter Dutton has been compared to Donald Trump, or rather derogatorily, of course, Timu Trump. And there has been this aspect that those who are more ideologically closer to the President of the United States are beginning to falter under that rhetoric, that style of economics, the bringing in of a Doge kind of oversee for government expenditure, targeting things that are woke and all that. I'm beginning to see this happening in Australia as well. Do you think that this is also happening?
Well, I think that Peter Dutton did decide some time ago, once Trump won the election late last year, perhaps even earlier, that it could be beneficial to his electoral prospects if he emulated some of Trump's populist approaches. And he has continued to do so right up till now, with proposals to cut immigration, to slash federal public service jobs, to go nuclear, to expand gas fields, to threaten the budget of the ABC Broadcasting Corporation. And I think he has to be careful. I think he's taking a risk borrowing songs from Trump's playbook, because Trump is becoming very unpopular in the rest of the world, and to some extent in the US as well. So it may not benefit Peter Dutton to be seen to be similar to Trump in these ways. It may backfire.
This is, of course, safe Nationals territory. Barnaby Joyce is running for re-election, former Deputy Prime Minister, former leader of the Nationals. He has a very safe margin at the last election. Of course, there will be changes because we now have areas like Muswellbrook, which are more Labor-leaning, coming into the electorate at the moment. What's your position on what could be the result of this upcoming federal election? Because we know Mr. Joyce has also been under a lot of scrutiny over the last parliamentary term, and Labor, with Laura Hughes as their candidate, is really making a solid push for this seat, despite the overwhelming Nationals vote in this area.
Well, I don't like to predict the outcomes of elections, because as we've seen with Trump twice now, it can be a dangerous activity. But it does seem, given his comfortable share of the vote at the last election, nearly 50% first preferences and nearly 2/3 two-party preferred vote, It does seem very unlikely that he would lose this seat, regardless of various things that have happened in the recent past. But having said that, I would say Barnaby is certainly losing his luster. He's not offering as much clout to his electorate as he did in the past when he was the leader of the National Party. He was a minister in the coalition government. He was deputy prime minister. And now, today, we hear in the media the speculation that he's going to lose his spot on the front bench in Parliament if, as is predicted, the Liberal Party gains proportionately more seats in this coming election than the National Party. And so, yes, even if he retains his seat, he won't be in as good position as he has been historically. And he seems to often be associated with controversy, but by choice, I might add, when it comes to policies. So he's one of the leading lights in the coalition campaign to introduce nuclear power reactors on the east coast of Australia, and some of those were slated to be sited near Newcastle. So I wonder what the good folk of Muswellbrook will think of that if they're in the vicinity of such nuclear power sites, nuclear power station sites. So that may not play well for him closer to the coast either.
He has also been very adamant, constantly railing against what he calls intermittent power. He has denied to me today that it's him, when he constantly brings it up at almost every occasion, that it's a popular topic with voters and all that. I've started looking through many comments that have been posted under his videos when he talks about intermittent power, and people are starting to get very weary of him just constantly talking about that one issue. He even tied it in with the tariffs today, saying that intermittent power should be, the 82% target should be abandoned by the federal government because of these tariffs that have just been brought in. But it seems that people are starting to also get tired when he's not speaking about other issues that might be also on voters' minds as well.
Well, this links up several issues that Barnaby Joyce has been preoccupied with for some time now. And one is that he's a long-standing climate change skeptic. He doesn't seem to believe in climate change, or if he does, he doesn't believe that we could or should do anything to mitigate it. So that's one issue. And that links to the fact that he's hostile towards renewable energy. And Labor governments at state and federal level have been pushing hard for renewable energy as an obvious means to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in Australia and thereby mitigate future climate change. And Barnaby Joyce and the right wing of the coalition more broadly have not been sympathetic to that view. And then it brings us to the local perspective where because of the New England renewable energy zone, they've brought in big solar farms, wind farms. They want to introduce high transmission power lines from the coast to the New England to bring the renewable energy back to the coast. And those plans have upset a certain sector of the constituency in Barnaby's New England electorate. And he has rallied with them to oppose, in particular, those transmission lines, which are going to take up so much space in the landscape. But yeah, the intermittent power is a bit of a furphy. I mean, we know that there are ways of backing up renewable energy with batteries, with pumped hydro, and it's also well understood that renewable energy is cheaper than other forms of energy, and as the renewable energy share increases, the prices of power will go down. But Barnaby Joyce is not willing to acknowledge that. So.
Despite some of the rhetoric or how he has been performing more recently, why is it that we're still seeing an area like the New England being pretty much a rusted-on Nationals stronghold? We had, of course, Tony Windsor as the independent, but he was, of course, a ex-Nationals member. It seems that regardless of whatever Mr. Joyce does, he's our Barnaby, he's our Mr. Joyce, he's the guy that is going to be one who speaks his mind and you know what he's thinking, and he's the guy on the street.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you just answered your own question, but I can say a little bit about it. I think that's right. I think he came from this electorate. His parents had a farm here, which he's inherited. He's a rural and regional person that identifies with the people who live here. He has a charismatic style of sorts that seems to appeal to local people. He's a man who can come into the pub and shake people's hands and chat with them in a friendly manner that people relate to. He seems to listen to their concerns. He is a National Party member, and as you keep saying, it is a rusted-on National Party electorate. So that many people in these electorates in this region simply keep voting the way they have always voted. So I think it would take a lot for them to change their vote. And there were strains, you know, when there were unfortunate developments in Barnaby Joyce's private life, and you know, the issue with him being found drunk on the footpath next to a planter box, you know, but I think those kinds of private misdemeanors can be excused, and people still seem to have a lot of faith in him. Yeah.
Doctor, thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate your analysis on the situation.
You're very welcome.
It's no secret the Labor Party has a difficult climb ahead of them in the seat of New England. Incumbent member Barnaby Joyce won the seat at the last election with 52% of the primary vote alone. But that challenge isn't dissuading Labor's Laura Hughes, who sat down this afternoon with Firstline, saying she can win the seat for the party, despite the electorate not going to Labor since 1910. Well, Laura Hughes, it's good to see you. It's week one, finish of the campaign trail for Labor. First, how have things been going?
Really, really well, thank you. We're a really organised campaign. We've got lots of things we've done, lots of things we're still planning on doing. So this week, probably the highlight of the week was the Muswellbrook Chamber of Commerce Meet the Candidates. They have their meetings at breakfast time. So we had a breakfast meeting last Tuesday. And there was a room of about 100 or so people. It was great to meet lots of people from Muswellbrook. Of course, Muswellbrook's now in the New England electorate, so that's new for them. And it was a really good morning.
There's a lot of people in that electorate who will, of course, be needing to have their concerns and issues addressed. And there's a lot of issues that are dominating this campaign, of course, cost of living, energy, renewable energy being one of the big topics, of course, for that whole area, given that this is where the Liddell Power Station is.
Correct.
What was the response to how your and Labor Party's policy on going towards that full renewable energy system by the next couple of decades turned up with? How did people respond?
Look, it went really well. It was very, very positive. The room was full of high-vis shirts. So pretty much everyone there has a stake in the mining industry or the electricity industry or both. And they are very aware of the timeline of various coal mines. There's one coal mine that will shut soon in the next few years, and there's a timeline for various different coal mines. Different coal mines mine different types of coal. So thermal coal is for electricity. Then of course you've got your coal for metal and all that sort of stuff. The coal mines in the Hunter Valley produce excellent quality coal. And no one can argue that coal mines and mining has contributed hugely to the wealth of Australia for decades. So to suggest that we should just turn that off like turning a tap off straight away or very, very soon is not realistic. And I really got that impression from them. The Liddell Power Station and the Bayswater Power Station were purchased by AGL. And I had the opportunity to go and speak to AGL. Senator Tim Ayres invited me to go. They have decommissioned Liddell. So as you drive south from Tamworth towards Muswellbrook, through Muswellbrook and south of Muswellbrook, it's on the left, and Bayswater's on the right. Bayswater is still producing electricity. It's beyond its age, but they're looking after it extremely well to keep it going. And Liddell looks amazing. It looks so different. They have regenerated the land. They have put in a massive battery electric storage system, a BESS. It's just so impressive, and AGL has put in the money for that. So what they want to do is put a whole heap of electricity into the grid. So that's connecting up with Transgrid. So massive, massive project, and they want to get some partners online in the next few years. Senator Tim Ayres was able to talk to them about the Futures Made in Australia plan that we have. Several $1 billion, something in the order of 20-something $1 billion is going into that to support private enterprise for resurrecting our manufacturing sector, particularly in the energy sector, but of course in other sectors as well. And AGL was very interested in that. And the thing about the Future Made in Australia and all the plans that Labor has is we're not spending your tax dollars. It's not just the government doing these things. Now, you and I both know that the National Party and the Liberal Party have a policy for nuclear. They don't have any private money. There aren't any private companies who want to put into that at this point in time. So we're looking at roughly $600 billion that's going to come out of my pocket and your pocket in the way of our taxes. So many people believe the nuclear plan is flawed and not a good way to proceed, but that's one of the reasons why, one of the few reasons.
One of the big things, of course, that has been discussed for New England, because of our local member Barnaby Joyce being one of the biggest proponents of nuclear energy, and he's made all these big claims that it's going to be cheap, reliable, it will provide jobs and that security for Australia's energy needs. But we know that this is an incredibly divisive policy. And I think part of the reason is because it's pretty much come out of the blue straight away. We aren't a country that has had a history of using nuclear energy. We use it for research purposes, science, the Lucas Heights reactor and all that. We don't have that history when it comes to nuclear, but there are quite a few proponents who are saying that this could be the solution to our energy needs over the next few decades, as well as reduce our emissions. But you have issues with that.
Yes, definitely. You just literally look at the facts. It's frustrating that comments are being made that are not factual. And comments are being made that are critical and that are perhaps have a bit of emotion in them. This is science. Let's look at the science. In Australia, we are somewhat of a unique country, very different from European countries, for example, in that we have an abundant supply of renewable energy, an abundant supply of sun, wind, solar wind and geothermal and wave technology and all of that. There's so many options that we have. In the last 3 years, the Labor government has really pushed forward a number of projects. So we're getting renewable energy zones in several parts of the country, including in the New England. And again, that public-private partnership with many, many projects going ahead. In the last 3 years, $40 billion worth of projects have started. Some are on the way to completion, and there are more coming down the line. And this is why we're doing the Future Made in Australia, because it's just a no-brainer. It is to consider nuclear. We're looking at decades before we've got any electricity. We're looking at billions of dollars, 600 billion, and it's very possible it'll be more than that. There are 2 nuclear reactors being built in the UK. They've been constructed for many years, I think more than a decade, 15, 20 years. They're not finished. They're way over budget, and they haven't produced a drop of electricity yet. So Barnaby Joyce cannot guarantee that it's going to come in on budget and it's going to be done in the time frame. And he sort of gets around the time frame. I mean, 20 years is a long time. What are we going to do in the next 20 years? These coal mines that produce thermal coal for electricity are not, most of them won't be around in 20 years' time. Some will, but lots of them simply won't have, either they won't have sufficient coal, or the coal that they have, it gets to a point where it's not profitable for the company, the mining company. So they might be going so far down that to bring it back up is not effective financially. Or when they're getting out some rubble and dirt, they're extracting the coal from that and not extracting enough coal to make it worth their while. So there comes a point in time where the mining companies have to make a decision. They're in business. They want to make a profit. They're not going to keep doing it if they're not making a profit.
Well, I know that Peter Dutton, in, of course, the budget reply that happened last week, his solution, at least for a short to medium term future, is to inject more gas into the network, which would be, of course, quite a big boon for that market. And we know that the Labor and state governments are also maintaining the use of gas as well. Their coalition plan for renewables is certainly more of a mix, instead of the almost completely reliant on renewables for from a Labor perspective. They're arguing with nuclear and then putting gas in for a more seamless transition. Why is the problem with gas though? Because they're offering that as their solution if they were elected.
Well, the thing about the National Party and the Liberal Party and Mr Dutton is they come up with an idea, like a back of the envelope idea. They say, "Oh, such and such is a good idea. Let's get some gas going," and you think, "Okay, have you thought this through? What's the plan?" In the Labor Party, we've got ministers who are incredibly skilled, and they rely on their departments, their public servants, who are also highly skilled, and they get independent bodies to research whether their plans are worthwhile, whether their plans are affordable, whether they're going to work. And we don't start until we've really considered all those things. We are careful managers of our government and managers of our economy. And the proof's in the pudding. Labor's already getting results in the last 3 years. What we've done in the last 3 years, you just need to Google it and find out. The projects that are underway in the last 3 years, the projects that are already producing electricity. We've done a lot of work on battery storage. And as I said before, it's not just us as taxpayers paying for it. The private companies are willing to put in a lot of money of their own because they know this is the future. They know they're going to make money out of this down the track.
And there's a lot of change just over the past couple of days. One of the big talking points that I want to talk to you is your thoughts on this enormous impact that Donald Trump has had regarding tariffs. We are seeing a 10% tariff that will strike the Hunter New England up to the northwest beef cattle industry. The farmers are still waiting to see exactly what is going to be the effects of this, and there's this push for Buy Australian. What is your take on what is happening?
Look, I think most people would agree that what's happening in America is unprecedented and perhaps unwise. Australians need to know it's not us that will be paying extra money, but when we are trading and exporting something, whether it be a raw material or something that's been produced, when it arrives in America, the purchaser of our exports is required to pay a tariff on that to the American government. So it's going to cost those companies more, and it would make sense for them to pass on those costs to American consumers. So the main effect will be on the American consumer and all those private companies that want to manufacture and produce products to sell in their market or elsewhere. I heard comments from Labor saying that they're going to have a very sensible approach. They are in conversation with the Americans. We have a good relationship with the Americans. We know our portfolio, we know Australia, we know our business, and we know how to go and argue our case, and that will continue to happen. I would much rather have that sober, sensible, thought out, planned, researched approach than the approach that, whatever approach the Liberals and the Nationals will take. Who knows what that will be? I mean, I can't trust them. I don't know that they're going to have the skill set to do that, so I don't want them in government.
Well, I can actually show you part of what Mr. Joyce actually has said today.
Trump, I don't think, really cares about Mr. Albanese. I don't think he ever did, and I don't think he's about to start. All we can do is how we manage this domestically. That is our only way of mitigating the circumstances which are now apparent in Australia with tariffs coming on beef. Now down there, just down there, is Meatworks, and over there is Thomas Foods and other Meatworks, and out there is chickens. So we've got cattle, we've got sheep, we've got chickens, we've got processing. When Tamworth processes, Australia eats. We're a big part, but not the only part, we're a big part of providing the food that goes onto the shelves. And that processing of food is now going to be affected by tariffs. It affects the whole industry because it affects the returns going back. So what can Australia do? What can we do? Well, I'll tell you one thing that Mr. Albanese, if he wants to be strong, could do today. He could come out and say, in light of the circumstances which we find ourselves in now, having an 82% intermittent power target by 2030 is bat poo crazy. And we're going to put this on ice until we let things settle down, because we've got to make sure that meat works. And remember, food processing is the biggest employer in the manufacturing industry, in the processing industry, of blokes and women in Australia. That's it. That's the big employer. And if we want to look after the workers, and if we want to look after the people in the shops, and if we want to look after the farmers, then you can't do that and look after an 82% 2030 intermittent target. It is crazy, and it just belies any real earnest and authenticity in what you say about how you're going to manage this situation we find ourselves in.
So what do you make of Mr. Joyce's comments?
Well, I'll tell you what's crazy. I'll tell you what's crazy is this constant refrain about intermittent power. What a load of nonsense. And I'm pretty sure, in fact, I've had voters tell me that they're sick of him saying it, and they're sick of it being inaccurate and not factually correct. So we have systems that produce electricity from renewables. No, they don't go 24 hours a day. We don't have the sun shining 24 hours a day. Every Australian knows that. My kindergarten students know that. But we have batteries, for heaven's sakes. Get into the 21st century. We have batteries that store that electricity and then put that back into the grid for when that electricity is needed. I mean, I have students in primary who study that in science, and they know that. They know that. I don't know why Mr. Joyce is saying this. He's trying to trick the Australian voter, and it's very frustrating. There's a few other factual inaccuracies there. He said manufacturing of food was our biggest industry, made it sound like it was the biggest manufacturing industry in Australia. I'm going to Google that because I don't think that's right. I'm pretty sure he just said that off the top of his head. He says a lot of things off the top of his head, actually. And I don't appreciate the, what do they call it in cricket, sledging? Is it sledging in cricket? He's doing a lot of sledging. He's sledging Mr. Albanese. Well, how about stop sledging, tell us some really good policies, tell us how you're going to actually represent New England, because you've been doing it for 12 years, Mr. Joyce, and you haven't done a very good job.
You, of course, want to be the representative for New England. This is a very safe national seat. Labor got 18% of the primary vote. You got a 5% swing towards you. Do you honestly believe that you will be able to convince enough voters, not just from Muswellbrook and everyone where there could be some more traditional Labor voters in that place, but to convince rusted-on Nationals voters who are always keen for either a very strong independent or a Nationals candidate like what they've had for decades? Do you honestly think that you could turn the seat red?
Yes, I do, and I'll tell you why. And I'm going to go with facts. I'm not going to sledge, and I'm not going to appeal to people's emotions and say things off the top of my head. Let me give you some facts. Yes, I got between 18 and 19% of the primary vote last time. Because Muswellbrook is now in the electorate, we are nominally at a margin of about 15%. So roughly speaking, I need about 1 in 6, 1 in 7 of the people who voted for Mr. Joyce in 2022 to vote for me.
Do you think that's going to happen?
Yes, I think it's entirely possible, because I've had so many conversations with people saying that they're a bit embarrassed by his behaviour in his personal life. They're getting sick of the constant ranting and raving and not even completing a full sentence and the things that he says. They're getting sick of the sledging, and they want some positivity. I bring a positive light to the campaign. I think I'm a good foil for Mr. Joyce. I think people can go, I am not influenced or supported financially by somebody who's extremely wealthy. I don't have anything like the money he has, but I'm making a good use of every dollar that I've got. I have a much bigger campaign from a financial point of view this time compared to last time. I've had a number of people come to me directly and tell me that they want to support me. They really want to see a change. I've got a number of people wanting my core flutes up so that people can see who they're going to vote for. We have more than twice the volunteers we had last time already, and we've got 4 weeks to go. So everything is more positive, everything is more organised, everything is better than last time. I've got some experience behind me now. And I'll give you an example of why I think I might win, why I know I'll win, why I'm aiming to win is, for example, in election time, in campaigning time, we have Meet the Candidate forums, often put on by a business chamber, something like that. Muswellbrook had theirs a few days ago. Thank you, Muswellbrook, for having me. It was really good to see you all and to welcome you to the New England electorate. Mr. Joyce wasn't able to attend.
In all fairness, of course, he is a shadow minister, so he does have those other duties.
He was in the electorate.
Oh, really?
He was within the electorate. Sorry, that's what he thinks of his voters. I think I can make one in 7 of them change their mind. I think it's very doable. We've got one scheduled for Armidale, and the organisers have told us he won't be attending that one either. So, sorry, Armidale, he doesn't think you're important enough to turn up.
And we have one that's planned for Tamworth later this month. And
the date's been changed a few times.
Yes.
So we'll see about that one.
So we'll see what.
I'll be there.
Well, that's certainly good to know.
There.
That's certainly good to know. Before we wrap up, there's a couple of other things I also want to talk to you about. I have spoken to a couple of Indigenous representatives around the whole national scope when the budget was released last week, and some of them were happy that we had about $1.3 billion towards closing the gap targets, which, as you know, is absolutely crucial here in Tamworth. But it's judged to be going nowhere near enough to actually address properly the issues that have been listed in the closing the gaps targets. We're even to the point now that Tamworth Regional Council, of course, has signed this historic partnership with TACO, so that we can actually have some closing the gaps target at a local level. Yes. Like, do you agree that maybe there should have been a bit more money in Jim Chalmers' budget? Because $1.3 billion, while it's a lot, it hasn't been blown out of the water. We've got to try and fix these issues, especially as so many Indigenous people are hurting after the Voice referendum.
Yes. Well, from the point of view of the budget, I wouldn't want to change jobs with Dr. Jim Chalmers. I think he and his team, Katie Gallagher and the whole Treasury team, what a remarkable group of people, and they must have worked so hard for that. I know that they were aiming for a sensible, sober budget. We've been hit by natural disasters, and that's cost the federal government money and lots of other people lots of money. We preceded this budget with 2 budget surpluses. So you've got to pay that. You've got to acknowledge that. You know, Mr. Joyce's government hasn't had one in donkey's years. You know, we got 2 in our first 2 years. We're doing something right. When it's a government income is different from a household income. It's much more complex. But in the way it's similar is, okay, I've got this much income. What am I going to do with this much income? So there's many calls upon that budget and that money, many stakeholders who want access to that money. And Indigenous people is one group of those stakeholders. I was disappointed with the Voice referendum result. Again, it was frustrating because non-factual things were being said by Mr. Dutton and by Mr. Joyce, and I was very frustrated by that. I was there on the polling booths, and people were just confused. And that was very frustrating. I wish that they could campaign honestly and with integrity. Anyway, so I had the opportunity to go to Tamworth Aboriginal Medical Service and meet with the CEO, Damien. What an amazing bloke he is. He's been doing that job for a while. And he was telling me about the funding that they get. They actually get funding from a number of different sources. And his service has grown quite a lot in the last few years. It's quite remarkable, the people who work there and the services they offer. And they don't just offer them to Indigenous people. Non-Indigenous people can access their services as well. What an impressive outfit they have. And they're expanding out to Gunnedah. And they're a really good model. And that's why they've been a driving force behind TACO, which is the Tamworth Aboriginal, let me get this right, Community Corporation,
Controlled or Coalition.
Yes, thank you.
Of organisations.
Yes,
it's quite an
basically
acronym.
It's a group of Indigenous organisations coming together and going, okay, how can we work together and get the best for our people and the best bang for buck? Brilliant idea. There is a national level of that, and that's where they've taken their model from, and I was really impressed by that. I also had the opportunity to speak to the CEO of Homes North. Her office is in Armidale, but they're all over the northwest, pretty much in every town, and they provide affordable and social housing to a number of people. They've increased up to 2,600 dwellings, with families living in those dwellings, and a lot to manage there, as you can imagine. She told me that the Housing Authority has existed for a number of decades. Housing Authority, like where Mr Albanese grew up in social housing, it has existed for decades. Unfortunately, governments of both persuasions have done less building and maintaining of social housing over many decades, probably in the last 40, 50 years.
And a lot of that's become a big scandal
Yes.
because of the quality some of these houses that people have been forced to live in. They have basically been death traps, essentially.
So
and you've got a lot of families, and those who are most vulnerable, they're the ones who are paying the price.
So a lot needs to be done about that, and we've dropped the ball. There's no argument about that. So we've got to really start to improve that and pick that up. So what Labor did was, they didn't just have the Housing Authority, they built the Housing Authority Future Fund. So the idea is they put aside some money, put that in a fund, that can't be touched. That can be added to, but not touched. We can use the interest. And that interest will entirely go to social and affordable housing. The CEO told me, she said, Laura, that's been a game changer. That's been a game changer because we now know there is guaranteed money for her organisation and equivalent organisations across Australia to apply for that money to increase social and affordable housing. And as you say, to fix up and improve the housing that we currently have. And so she just said, that's the phrase she used, game changer. When you go with facts, when you go and talk to the people who are doing the hard work and approaching the federal government and asking for support to either do public funding or public-private partnership, Labor's the way to go.
And finally, Ms Hughes, Labor's had a very strong momentum since last week, and there's been the party shifting in front in the two-party preferred vote. How confident are you maintaining that momentum over the next 4 weeks? Because as they say, a week is a long time in politics. An election season, an hour seems like an eternity.
Yeah, that's exactly true. Look, I think that Australians across the board are starting to think about the election, and I think they're starting to think about their options. And they're watching the news, they're perhaps doing some research of their own, they're talking amongst their family and friends and their workmates, and they're seeing the evidence. I've mentioned evidence a couple of times. They're seeing the evidence. The Labor federal team is very strong. If you look at each of the ministers in their portfolios, they are across their portfolios. They know what they're doing. They've done a great job. We've got a lot of plans. I've mentioned Future Made in Australia, but there's many other plans in all the different portfolios, and you've been hearing about them. You'll hear some more. I think people were grateful that we brought down a sensible, reasonable budget. We didn't go overboard, and people are going, yeah, look, Labor seems like the best bet. They're frustrated with the likes of Mr Joyce and Mr Dutton just saying all these things over and over again ad nauseum, and thinking, well, how about some facts? How about some truth? How about some actual plans and policies? It's just not happening. One side's doing it, Labor's doing it. So there's the evidence. As far as the next few weeks, I think we're going to maintain that momentum. We're going to respect Easter and Anzac. We're not going to campaign at Easter and Anzac. We're going to be respectful of those days, and there are a number of Australians who observe those days. Not every Australian does, but lots of Australians do, so we're going to be respectful of that. But we're going like the clappers the rest of the time. So I'm heading to Armidale and Urella, heading up to Tenterfield. Janelle Saffin, who's a very popular state member, let me know she's got some work that she's doing up there. So we're going to take the opportunity to have a short meeting and hopefully meet some really fantastic Tenterfield people. I'll be back in Muswellbrook. And I'm planning on going to Merriwa and Denman. I've got a schedule over the next few weeks. I'm taking leave from my work so I can concentrate. I do love the children, I love teaching them, but I can't have my head in two places at once. So I've been granted some leave, which is great, and of course it's the school holidays. So I'll be going full bore for the next 4 weeks.
Well, Laura Hughes, we look forward to seeing you on the rest of the campaign.
Thanks, Daniel, and I'm going to give it a good red hot shot. And I'm just hoping that people will consider me as a reasonable alternative.
Staying with the Labor Party, and the federal government has continued to build momentum since Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called the election last Friday, just days after the federal budget. Earlier this week, I sat down with Deborah O'Neill, Labor's duty senator for the Cedar Parks, an area stretching from Gunnedah to Broken Hill, which is a massive national stronghold. She touted many achievements made by the Albanese government, but admits they've struggled to get their message across to voters. Senator O'Neill, thank you very much for joining me on Firstline.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you, Daniel, and with your viewers and listeners.
Now, we are in the first couple of days of the election campaign, and so far it seems that things are going towards the government. We know that Labor is ahead on the two-party preferred vote, and Anthony Albanese is the preferred Prime Minister. How are you feeling about keeping that momentum going for the next 5 weeks?
Well, I don't think in the course of my lifetime that history has been so volatile as it is right now. I was a student of history, and I can remember being in my bedroom at my mum and dad's place at Campbelltown and reading about how Hitler was building a machine for war in the 1930s and the instability that brought to the entire world and the incredible loss of life. I don't think we've seen a period of international instability as we have experienced in the last several years. And I think that's just one among many reasons about why I don't think Australians need more change right now. The world is so tumultuous. The Albanese Labor government, Anthony Albanese, has delivered a very steady government. There haven't been any great scandals. We've been getting on with the job, and the job is making sure that Australians, when things get tough, get the support that they need. And that's why, we've delivered a tax cut to 14 million Australians. And that's an awful lot more than they would have got if the other side were in charge. And just in your area, to give you a sense of how much support, and I want to get these figures right, so if you just bear with me, the average cut, the tax cut for your viewers and listeners, Daniel, is $1,465. And that was 62,000 people in your seat got the benefit of that. Now, the important number, though, is if it wasn't Labor delivering that tax cut, 53,000 fewer of your local residents would have got that tax cut. So that's a huge number, right? So 86% more people in your electorate got a tax cut because of the way Labor shaped it to make sure that it went to everybody who needed it rather than just to people who were really at the top end of the margins. So that's a big difference. And that kind of reveals the sort of government we are, that, giving that tax cut to more people helps more businesses in your region, helps your regional and local economy. And it's also just fair. We shouldn't be leaving people behind. We need to lift everybody because, as your viewers know, especially in regional Australia, economies are intimately connected. They have these local cycles. And when the money disappears, everybody feels the pain.
Yes, that's exactly true. I'm very interested, of course, to know Given the fact that you have been touting the economic record, the relatively scandal-free Albanese government, why is it, though, that this election is so close? And we've had various opinion polls that put the coalition ahead, that could even possibly have given them a majority government, until, of course, for the past month, they have certainly stumbled quite a few times. What is it about this disconnect that I am seeing, or at least I'm interpreting?
Well, we always say that the only poll that really matters is the one that happens on the day. So I encourage everybody to enrol to vote. Check your enrolment and make sure your enrolment is in order so that on the 3rd of May, you can have your say. What we know about what people have been doing and having their say over the last couple of elections is that the old paradigm of, a bipartisan split. So Australia's Labor Party or the Liberal National Party coalition, which is a blend of two parties anyway, that's been the traditional way in which people would vote one way or the other. Well, now we know with the rise of additional parties and additional coalitions of people under a different range of colours. So we've had red, blue, now we've got teal, we've had yellow with the Clive Palmer party, we've got the Greens political party. That whole shape of Australia's political landscape has changed, and it's changed forever. We're not going to go back to, a blue-red contest. All these other voices are now there in the middle, and that changes things. But people have their choice when it comes to voting on the day, to avoid all of the uncertainty about those other parties and, make it clear that they want stability for the government, stability for the country, and vote clearly for their Labor candidate and clearly for Labor in the Senate to increase the stability of the current government. Now, it's a free country. You can choose what you're going to choose, but I would always encourage you to vote one Labor, fill in the form appropriately, fill in every box. That's a very important thing. Fill in every box in the House of Representatives, and fill in, if you're above the line, at least 6 of the boxes for the large, I think we call it the tablecloth vote for the Senate, really, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly has been infamous over the past few decades, given how big it is. And I would be very surprised if a Labor senator decided to endorse a Liberal candidate or anyone other outside of her party. I'm very interested to know, of course, what are some of the big commitments and the accomplishments that Labor has done specifically for the seat of Parkes. We have this particular area of Narrabri, Wee Waa, Gunnedah. In many ways, that often gets a little bit forgotten that it's part of that Parkes area, which goes all the way to Broken Hill. It's a massive electorate, and that can be very difficult for a lot of people to think that their voices are being heard. What kind of accomplishments has Labor actually done in this term?
Well, you make a really, really good point there, Daniel, because while people are getting on with their lives, they don't pay attention to every single press release that comes out from the federal government about what's being delivered into their community. But they do have an expectation that things are going to be done fairly, right? And Labor shares that expectation that every single taxpayer dollar that comes to Canberra needs to work really, really hard for the Australian population, for our economy and for our communities and for our businesses. So I just finished chairing at the recently the second round of the Growing Regions Fund. People might know this by an older version under Senator Mackenzie, which was the coloured coded charts, where basically Australian taxpayer dollars were being sort of shoved into seats where the Liberal Party and the National Party thought that they needed to put the money to get a vote.
It was the massive pork barrelling scandal, and that also tied in with the sports rort scandal as well.
Exactly. And people don't always know what pork barrelling is, but people in Australians understand fairness, right? That wasn't fair, and it wasn't good use of Australian taxpayers' money. So when we've evened the playing field out and put proper probity measures in place, to the tune of, actually creating a committee with members from different parties from around the country who determine what looks like really good value for money before those grants are given. We've got incredibly sound probative processes in place to make sure that your Australian taxpayer dollar, you work really hard, you send some to Canberra, you expect us to spend it wisely. Well, we've been spending it very, very wisely in that very, very clear and uncontroversial way. So when I was in the seat of Parks, I announced $42 million worth of funding for 6 major projects, including $10 million for the PCYC in Brewarrina, that had put in grant application after grant application after grant application and weren't getting anything. Well, on merit, they're getting their PCYC. That's how Labor is making sure that your taxpayer dollars work really hard. But it's not just through a grant process like that. We have put in place major commitments to support the things that we know matter. And roads are a huge part of those issues, as well as general infrastructure. Now, for the people in Narrabri, I was just showing you before we actually went live with this version of our conversation today. This is just pages and pages of commitments that have been delivered into Narrabri in the last 3 years of the Labor government. So Narrabri Shire Council, for example, they got $1.483 million for the Narrabri Shire Tourism Cultural Precinct, stages 2 and 3. And that's going to transform Tibberina Street. Also for the council, replacement curb and guttering. Now, it doesn't sound very sexy, but the reality is it makes a big difference. Like, you don't do those things right, you end up with flooding and issues, road erosion, all of that sort of stuff, potholes. And when you're driving your car and you lose your suspension because there's a pothole big enough to swallow the car nearly, that isn't good enough. And so we've been investing in roads. So this is a replacement curb and guttering, $225,000. Installing LED lights at Sportingfield Oval. That's a fantastic investment in community health and well-being, but also people gathering around, being able to play after you've done a hard day's work or hard day's school or study. $900,000. Boggabri. Now, I know the people of Boggabri are very, very proud of their town, and Boggabri Courthouse, which is historically significant, received a $90,000 boost from the federal government, with a project delivered once again through Narrabri Shire Council. $200,000 for the Narrabri Lawn Cemetery to have proper drainage. Now, that matters to everybody. It matters to, the grave diggers who need to be able to get in there in all sorts of weather to go ahead and do what they need to do. It matters to people who are coming to say farewell to somebody that they've loved for a lifetime, that they can actually get to where they need to be in the cemetery and do that, without drowning in inappropriately undrained areas. Curb and guttering. Again, this one's in Warrior Street in Weewar, $850,000. $60,000 to repair the truck wash facility. $85,000 to do 170 metres of drainage. $50,000 for the Fitzroy Hogan Streets in on the left-hand side, 85 James and Saunders Street, Dewhurst and Bowen Streets, Doyle and Lloyd Streets, Purcell Avenue and Maitland Street. Hundreds of thousands of dollars for each of those, and a really big grant. And this isn't all of them by any stretch of the imagination, Daniel, but $2 million for the Violet Street Bridge between Tibberina Street and Selina Street. And we know that this is important because it's moderate cracking on the abutment headstocks and severe rotation and undermining of the wing walls. These things that locals know about and locals care about. And ideally, there would be enough money in your council to do these things with rates. But you've got small rate bases in many of these wonderful and important towns.
And many of our local councils have had to constantly increase rates a lot. We've had Gunnedah Shire Council, as you probably are aware, is applying for a 36.6% increase to their rates over 2 years to be financially sustainable.
And people are expressing to me how concerned they are about that. And we do need to make sure that the councils are going concerned that they are being financially operated properly, and that they use, in the way that I've just described the federal government, that every dollar that they spend is invested wisely for the maximum benefit for their community. But the investments that I'm talking about from the federal government take pressure off the local ratepayers to make sure that people who live in regional Australia who can't afford everything through their rate base get support from their federal government, and Labor is absolutely committed to doing that. And that was the sheet in Narrabri, but I've got a pile here for Gunnedah as well, and I've also got a pile for Moree of investments that have been going in. So Labor is committed to investing in the regional areas and in things that are real in people's lives, not just for an idea, not just for somebody's pet project, but real, back to basics, important things that the community needs.
And given the fact that you have listed all these achievements, it doesn't look like it's translating into a lot of the popular support that you would think. We've had recent surveys by other local media organisations across the New England that feel that while the Nationals and Liberals are not doing a great job in opposition, and there's a lot of frustration from incumbent members, there is a perception that the Labor Party and the government is not caring about what's happening in the New England Northwest. They're not happy with what's happening, particularly things like cost of living, which has been very problematic. And we know that there's been various cost of living measures that you've taken, but it seems that this message is not coming through from your side to the people, or the people are just not seeing any type of benefits at the moment. Can you understand where I'm coming from?
So I used to teach English, and one of the things about Shakespearean plays was the discussion about perception versus reality. And I know what the perception is. You've described it really well. And people just don't have access to a whole lot of information, because what we saw under the Liberal National Party, and your viewers and listeners can check this out for themselves, was the collapse of huge amounts of regional media. So where do people get their information? And when one particular group of people really push everything through social media, it's harder and harder to access. So that's why I'm really delighted that you're actually, giving people a chance to ask hard questions of a Labor senator, perhaps pop the bubble on some of the nonsense that's peddled. And, I just want to say directly to people, do not let your vote be taken for granted again. Mr. Coulton did not deliver for your community in the way that you wanted. And Mr. Coulton was responsible for a government that had inflation sitting at 6% and rising. Right, we're at a point now where the economic management of the Labor government has seen us get inflation down with a 2 in front of it. Wages in your local community are rising. We already spoke about the enhancement of the local economy by making sure there was a spread of that tax cut to a huge number of people, tens of thousands more in your electorate than would have been the case. The other thing is, I want to speak directly to people who are pensioners and concession holders. In a world of change, the indexation to assist them has been consistently coming through to make sure that they get a fair crack at it. And also, we've had the biggest rent assistance rises back on back in Australia's history. But in addition to that, those pensioners and concession holders are some of our most disadvantaged in terms of health. And one of the things you need to do to stay healthy after you've got to your doctor, and we can talk about that as well, is you need your medication. And we heard that very, very loudly and clearly. So to have a freeze on medication on PBS at $7.70 on the PBS for concession card holders and pensioners until 2030, that is one important certainty for hundreds of thousands of people across, indeed millions across New South Wales, who will now get access to the life-saving and the life-enhancing medicines that they need. Now, that is a very significant cost of living assistance to a particular group in the community.
And Senator, speaking of the medicines and all that, last week I spoke to the Chief Executive of the National Rural Health Alliance, Susie Teagan, and she says that one of her biggest concerns and what she is absolutely demanding from both sides of politics is to fix some of the regional healthcare infrastructure. She's incredibly concerned about the state of the infrastructure and services and resources in some of our more remote areas like Moree, like Narrabri, where people have to travel many hours or even days for treatment, or they have the accommodation which might not even cover their costs. There's the mental and the physical stresses on that. And many people want to have the access to treatments, even specialised treatments, closer to home instead of having to travel so many kilometres. Can you, if your government is re-elected, can you try and commit to try and improving the regional infrastructure? Because we've had major problems out here, ranging from hospitals on bypass, nurses on strikes, arguing with the state government, and there's always the concern that some of our hospitals could eventually be shut down.
Look, one of the challenges in this area is how the state and federal governments interact. And we didn't get to the point that you've just described by accident. I've been a senator now since 2013, and one of the first major inquiries I did was into the actual tearing apart of the national state-federal agreement about health when Mr. Abbott was elected. And people might remember that. He said there'd be no cuts to health, no cuts to education, no cuts to the ABC. No, that's what he said, but then went in and did it. And the person who implemented those cuts for Mr. Abbott was Mr. Dutton. So the scale of what happened was huge. We'd just got to the point where it was 50-50 states and federal. So this was to stop this blame game that people, your viewers and listeners are so sick of. We're all sick of it. So we just got to 50-50. Mr. Abbott said we couldn't do it, pulled it apart. And what he took out was $52 billion of national partnership agreements. For New South Wales alone, that was $22 billion. And what happened was the state government then had to try and keep its hospitals open on a far reduced budget over the next 10 years. And what we saw was the first thing they started to cut was all the community health. So where people used to go around and visit, help in the local area, we'd had prenatal, antenatal help. We also had aged care assessments and help going on in the home. We had people providing services more across the community. All that just shrunk and shrunk and shrunk to keep the hospitals open. And as that got worse under the Liberal National Party in New South Wales, the money shrunk further and further towards, the major population centres. So you can see Dubbo is intact and got an upgrade, but there's been a shrinkage. And in fact, one day I went to a state-funded hospital because it is the state responsibility for the infrastructure. The federals definitely comes in to support sometimes with funding, but it's mainly the staffing that federal looks after. But I went from a state hospital in the region, I won't say where because the people were wonderful, although the facility was just not up to 2024 standard. And a couple of days later, I was in a facility that was a research centre into animal care. And it was extraordinarily appointed. And I just thought there's something terribly wrong here. And it goes right back to that. So when you elect a government that says it's going to cut and it keeps telling you we can't afford things, the consequences down the track are exactly what you've described to me, and what your viewers and listeners know is the reality of regional access to healthcare. The facilities need a big uplift from the state government. Now, to be fair to the state government, we just had Premier Minns just declare that there will be no public-private partnerships after the debacle of what the people on the northern beaches have seen. That's over. That's never going to happen under a Labor government, and I doubt any Liberal National Party would be brave enough to go there again. And the biggest investment in 4 regional hospitals that we've seen in decades is now underway, right? So change is coming, and it has to come because people have a fundamental right to access good healthcare, and Labor believes that. What's really interesting, though, is when we found how bad things were when we came into government, one of the policy ideas that came forward was to establish urgent care centres to take some of the pressure off the emergency departments, which we know were like in crisis. And we also have to train many more GPs, and we're doing that. We're putting scholarships in place for people so that we have more students from the regions training, more students from low socioeconomic backgrounds who are smart, get the training, want to go back into their own communities. We're investing in all of that. But, we know that these urgent care centres were needed. So we said, right, we're going to set up 50 of them. They were so successful across the country that we said, we've got to put more. And so we ended up putting 87, even though we promised 50. Now, those 87 are in place, and they are across regional Australia. And if I can just put my hand on the detail here, these regional communities are receiving a large number of them. So there will be 135 of them if Labor is elected, and 48 of the 137 clinics are going to be in regional areas. And I can tell you, like in everywhere I go regionally, people are saying to me, we want one of them, because for some people, and particularly the people who are watching your show, Daniel, it's their Medicare card that gives them access. They don't have to have a credit card. They don't have to have an overdraft. They don't have to have a big bank balance to go and get their healthcare. They need their Medicare card, which is absolutely Labor to the bootstraps. That's like, there was no Medicare before Labor brought it in 1972. And it's been smashed and knocked down that many times by the Liberal National Party. We've rebuilt it and rebuilt it and rebuilt it. And that's why we've put the biggest investment ever, $8.5 billion back into Medicare. So urgent care centres everywhere that, they're needed, up to 137 of them if Labor's re-elected, making sure we get the workforce, which was, just cut off at the knees, re-established and distributed across the country in a fair and equitable way, and making sure that we fund wherever we can in concert with the state government the sorts of facilities and services that people need.
Senator Deborah O'Neill, thank you so much for joining me here on Firstline.
Vote Labor on the 3rd of May. Thank you.
Running as an independent during an election is no easy task. Just ask Natasha Ledger. She's a previous Uralla Shire councillor and ran in the 2019 federal election, gaining over 3.1% of the vote, and again in 2022, this time receiving 2.7%. Now it's third time lucky for Mrs Ledger, who's campaigned against nuclear power, but she's also had to apologise for a series of Facebook posts seen by this reporter, which were of a conspiratorial nature. Before asking about the Facebook posts, I asked Mrs Ledger why she is running again in New England.
I've run federally before, and that's due to the work that I have accomplished through council. I've accomplished a lot of work within the New England seat, but also the Northern Tablelands and federally speaking. So a lot of my projects have pertained to Australia as a whole, negotiating with Chinese, changing our trajectory of our trade routes, federally mitigating our transition energies, especially here in Uralla as a Uralla Shire Council. So a lot can be accomplished from just being a councillor. When the incumbents here had lost the balance of power, it was open slather. And consequently, we were able to put the Clarence Valley River Hydro on the table to the Senate. It was swept up with open arms. It's half built. It lent way to battery power storage, where it's improving now with technologies at the forefront. It's no longer ignored or in the back street. People are attaining to these and improving those technologies. And we've and I've also built the Regional Energy Hub, which is a diverse farm here in Uralla, and the mitigations and negotiations between that regional energy zone, here it's called the REZ, Regional Energy Zone, the negotiations between community and the Regional Energy Hub have been quite successful, whereas the community has put in requests, for example, that if they remove 70% of fauna, they want 80% of fauna replaced. They're in agreements made before the transaction happens. So, and with the wind farms in place, what we did is we realised that with the wind farms, with the RFS, we got incredible amount of RFS funding because there has to be someone on standby watching these things 24 hours a day, and that can't come at the cost of our government. So we've mitigated cost association with that, with the RFS. Hence why you don't see many RFS doing raffles anymore, because they've got the funding there available to deploy these measures if ever need be. And before the wind farms go up, they've been negotiated with community about how they're going to come down before they're going to go up. So the first third of the cost accumulated, or the wealth accumulated from these fans, goes straight back into, first of all, decommissioning them, because we understand their life cycle and we understand where we need to move on from there. So in those parameters set within the range of Urala's regional energy zone, which is solar, wind, hydro, the Clarence Valley River hydro, and then we've got the geothermal, which is a big winner as well. That technology, it produces more than coal and gas put together combined. So that's a big winner, and that's something that we're transitioning into. So along with these transitions, as we walk the walk and talk the talk, we come into new technologies available to us that the great Australia can take advantage of. We're not a small country like France where we're squeezed for land, that we have to get our energy resource from some minuscule place. We're a huge land, and we can walk in as we transition to this. And the fifth frontier of our diverse energy farm, because any farmer will tell you the best farm is a diverse farm. And so the fifth frontier of our energy requirement will be waste electric generation incineration project. So this waste incineration electric generation powers 144,000 homes, 24 hours a day. And two of those powers 288,000 homes, 24 hours a day. And that is equal to the output of one nuclear power plant. But with electric generation incineration, we get road base. And we need plenty of road base out here in the New England. If you talk to anyone, they will understand what that means. So that's our fifth frontier. So that's our regional energy zone, a diverse energy zone, and it encompasses a lot of community. I was at golf the other day, and the community said, I'm an avid golfer. The community said, you know, without the funds of the regional energy zone, these days they're much easier to put forward. We can hold these days, we can run this competition, we can do these things. So it's a win-win with community, and a lot of money is coming into the communities locally, being expended on communities in their day-to-day activities and where they want to do that thing. So it's a win-win situation.
And there's a lot of discussion about Australia's future energy supplies and where we're getting that. We know that the nuclear policy from the coalition is very controversial. Incumbent member Barnaby Joyce is a massive proponent on nuclear. He does argue that it's clean, it's cheap, it's reliable when these reactors will be set up, and we know one will be slated for the Liddell Power Station site that's just south of Muswellbrook, so there would be also a number of jobs being created. But I think one of the biggest controversies over it is, one, we've just been lumped with nuclear as a possibility for energy so quickly, but also there's this controversy over how much it would actually cost, as well as the fact that how reliable do you think having more renewables into our electricity mix will actually be?
I'll talk to two of those things. You've just stated two of those things. The first, I'll talk to Barnaby Joyce, National Party member running for the New England. Okay, yes, he has told Muswellbrook that it's clean, it's green, and it's easy. Okay, well, let me tell you about, it's easy to fling these words across. They're words everyone wants to hear, but let me tell you the reality of it. Nuclear power is actually illegal in our country presently, and for good reason. Okay, these nuclear power plants that are 11 times the size of the one in Lucas Heights that we have now that they're still turning off, uses 360 gigalitres of water every 3 days. That is reticulated back into our closed system and farmers have to test every piece of produce for radiation before it goes back out to market. Now, on top of which, there is 200-kilometre radius shutdown zones with seismic activity. Now, seismic activity is increasing in Australia.
And we've had several earthquakes around Muswellbrook, Denham, Tamworth. We've felt a few shocks over the past couple of months.
This is it. And on top of which is these things take 300 years to close down after only 80 years of use, producing only 14% of Australia's supply. That is a big, big task for billions of dollars, not equating to much at the end of the day. All right, so we can spruce all these words like Barnaby Joyce does: clean, green, jobs. Jobs. Let me talk about jobs. The people who engineer these things and run them, we have to get in from foreign countries, because that is the qualification of engineers to run them is required. There is not many jobs when these things get up and running. All right. Yes, I've heard about what people say in Muswellbrook, that they equate to jobs in building the infrastructure. Okay, well, they are used to industry, okay? Now, Muswellbrook, and I want to welcome everyone from Muswellbrook into the New England. The New England north of Muswellbrook has been largely built on small business. Let me tell you, small business is the backbone of the New England. It has been the gradient and the fundamental structure of the region that's held it together. And small business not to get any instant asset write-off or not even a mention in the federal budget is an absolute tarnish to this entire region. This region goes up way up past Tenterfield, goes way down past Muswellbrook. That is a small country. That's an 8-hour, 9-hour drive from one end to the other. That is a small country. And it has no transport past Armidale except for buses and a few taxis. Okay, so we don't have, and the place is growing in population. So more and more people require transportation, this kind of thing. So, and it's largely built off small business. So on that, in saying that, I've got a policy for small business and for youths going into apprenticeship. So that would help all of the small businesses within this region, where that includes an apprentice for 1.5 years paid by the government, and for the other 1.5 years paid by the business. And this apprentice gets a 10 grand write-off for himself of his first car, so that he's got some wheels to get around the place and get about his business and do his thing. Okay. The incentive is to stay for 3 years. If he doesn't stay for 3 years, he'll have to pay the government back for his car. But while he's in that for 3 years, that apprenticeship, learning his new skills, and as we all know, it's sometimes hard. You have to press on learning skills. So that's the incentive for him to stay in, or her to stay in that apprenticeship, is by having the incentive of keeping his first car or her first car, so they can drive around the region and get about their business, drive themselves to TAFE, drive themselves to wherever they need to go for the job, so that they can keep on with the job. And this will break a little bit of the boredom of this area and the children that are finding it difficult to get workplace agreements going. So that can be built upon as well. That is my first foot forward in small business for this area. Now, in saying that, I know that in construction, and then you've got Muswellbrook, who have largely been, what can I say? They're
quite industrial, because that area has, of course, all the current mines, the coal mines, the exporting out to Newcastle. There's a lot, and when eventually these mines have to be shut down, there will be the need for those people to be retrained to prevent an employment crisis. It would be certainly one option that they could be retrained with, working with the nuclear energy instead of coal.
Yeah, well, there's not many jobs that are required in that area. Now, England just opened up their first nuclear reactor, okay? And they got the biggest EPA fine in history for not transporting their nuclear waste correctly. Now, we can't even maintain roads out here. All right. We only just got telecommunications out here. There was this whole entire region was almost a black spot area. We are not at the capabilities to do this kind of work. And also, these nuclear power plants are largely becoming war targets now in the escalating global tensions. All right. So these are becoming war targets as these peace treaties are being overturned and thrown to the wayside. They are being genuinely looked at as war targets. I cannot express that enough, especially with knowing everyone's position on war and where they are in the world globally. It is imperative that we stay a safe country, and we are the safest country in the world to be in. If there was a nuclear war to break out, we are the safest. I cannot reiterate that enough. We are the safest country. Being safe surpasses any kind of mitigation that we have to forego, or any mitigation in driving our workforce to be a workforce. That's not a problem. Being the safest country in the world is imperative. And then all the other good things come from that. Coal has been safe for Australia. It's been a great way to keep prices down. And if mitigating putting up or maintaining one of these power plants that have been reduced down to nothing, it means putting one of those back up. I'm all for that every day of the week. I'll pay 3 times the amount it costs to put one back up instead of tearing it down. There is a lot of details that is required to be looked at to make sure that is a plausible option. And I believe that it can work in that area. So if we, I know that a banker and a solicitor and a engineer got together and they bought one of these outdated processing plants for coal, and they got it up and running, and they're making millions. They were the envy of the government not doing it themselves. So it shows to you, and it proves to us that it can be done. They can be rectified. They can be fixed up. And that is the way to go. If that needs to be done, that needs to be done. We cannot say that it's nuclear is anything that comes even close to that arrangement. It costs billions to put anything like that in, and it doesn't equate in the long run for our financial future. I tell you what it is all about is Julia Gillard, not Julia Gillard, the carbon tax creator. It's the Hancock Industries, which is Gina Reinhardt, that's correct, with her iron ore, has given the National Party $500,000, okay? And the gas company has given the National Party $400,000. Hence, the National Party are pushing gas and nuclear. It's not about the Australian public, I'm sorry to say. I'm sorry to say that Barnaby has got your hopes up. That's what he's got. That's what he does. But the last project that Barnaby delivered federally was the Scone Bypass. That was over 6 years ago. Okay, I'm into delivering lots and lots of projects all the time to get the economy flowing and going. I've just delivered a project that takes the Armidale Regional Rail up north past Deepwater. On that rail, there's a cannery, a glass manufacturing plant. Every single council has a manufacturing plant where they create a product from waste to go back out to market before it gets to the waste incinerator, electric generator. Okay, when this product that they make goes back out to market, they can put it out to the port, they can put it to Sydney. It requires engineers, marketers, manufacturers, all of these people, maintenance, to be employed in this factory. And once that factory makes money, 10% of that money goes into creating another factory. And that's from the councillors that have to create this and get working to create these business plans to sit along this railway line. Now, that creates Australian-made products going back out to market. We've got ladies up here that have jams and they do their pickling and they make the most gorgeous food products in glass containers that can't get out to market. We've got farmers that can grow their produce out here that isn't getting out to market.
And many of these markets are vital for the local economy, and they can actually draw in not just locals but tourists, especially as these markets can become bigger and bigger, and they can draw thousands upon thousands of people and become an institution in their own right.
Well, this is how it happens. When I first put the business plan for the wind farm forward, I asked and begged the Australian government to invest in their own energy market, knowing the state of how our energy market was. And they refused to. Okay, so the general manager asked to send that business plan to investors. Okay, so we started off with 7 private investors. Now we've got 107. That's how fast these things grow. All right, so that's what happens. And now we have to actually auction off our ports because so many investors are interested. Okay, this is how big the energy market is. So they will tell you anything. And what we need to do is tax this gas, which is worth $9 billion a year at extraction point rather than at the point of profit. I will be taxing at the point of profit as well, but that's worth $9 billion a year to our economy. So it's easier for Reinhardt Industries or whatever it is to give Barnaby Joyce $500,000 than to pay me $9 billion, is which she owes the economy. Okay, so that's why they don't like me. That's why they all know me. Santos has started selling shares. They don't like me. Okay, so, and I don't like them because they're putting 280 wells in the largest fresh water body in Australia right now. That's God's gift to our country, is the largest freshwater body. Any country in the world is envious of that. And to put 280 wells, gas wells, in our body of water is absolutely blasphemy. It's blasphemy.
At this point, the connection between Tamworth and Uralla was severed due to technical problems, but the interview resumed after a few minutes, where I asked Mrs. Ledger about those Facebook posts. The contents included sharing anti-vaxxer posts, medical misinformation, and a long list of people she claimed were Freemasons, which Mrs. Ledger told me off-air she didn't mean anything by the post. We now return to that interview. Mrs. Ledger, because we are running out of time, one of the things that you and I had also discussed very briefly, and we want to get this out of the woods, has been a few of the Facebook posts that you have made, and I know that you have raised a little bit of concern about some of the stuff that you've also shared, and that you're looking at deleting some of these posts. Are you aware of some of the more controversial conspiratorial posts that you have been sharing from Instagram and Facebook and all that?
Okay, in what manner?
Well, for example, yeah. Miss Ledger, if I can give you some of the examples. For example, on March the 22nd, you shared a video saying from a person in America saying nicotine can cure certain tumours. Now, I had a look into this video, and the person that and it looks like this suggestion is completely unsupported by any medical professor, science or anything, and it looks, and in fact, and looking at it at the same time, nicotine can actually make the tumours worse. I'm just wondering why you would be sharing this kind of information that's tied to your campaign
Right.
website
Yeah.
because
that's
it
okay.
makes
Let
it
me
because
answer
it
that
does
there,
make it look.
Michael. We don't have much time, like you said. I looked into that too, and it told me it was a false fact checker. So I looked into it further. I thought it was quite interesting information, and I thought, has anyone else got anything to add to this? But it turns out that that is actually, you're correct. It is not a way forward. It is not the, and I tried to remove that post, and I tried to get to that post. I'm not technically savvy in that way, but I did try to remove that post and I couldn't get to that post to remove it. So please forgive me for that one.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Another one that you also mentioned was ivermectin, which of course is a parasite drug. You mentioned that it's safer than Tylenol. Now, once again that a lot of these claims involving ivermectin, especially if you're comparing it safer to Tylenol, do you not see why that could be more problematic, especially as you have also shared you shared content from the anti-vaxxer Del Bigtree on March the 7th, and as well as a video from Dr. Leonard Coldell on March the 16th, whose credibility regarding cancer is one that's under heavy dispute. Given the fact that you are running as an independent federal candidate and you are looking to be taken seriously, can you understand why this would be very problematic?
Yeah, I do. I think that ivermectin information has been convoluted in recent times. Like, it has won 2 awards for being the scientific turn of the century, and that is not something to be sniggered at. I'm not too sure why the information is controversial at the moment, so that's quite an interesting, and I thought I'd put that forward in to see if anyone else has some information in regards to that. I think it's quite interesting to note that ivermectin is quite healthy for horses and has been taken off the medical schedule and put back on the medical schedule for humans. So I'm not too sure what the controversy in which that stands. So I wanted to explore that further. Not that I know about it exactly, about where it stands on the market, but I am unsure about why these controversial aspects have been taken on that. I'm concerned there. I am really concerned about that. Now, the other one is I don't know what the cancer one that you're referring to, but
this was March. This was that you had done March the 16th. It was regarding cholesterol and cancer. You shared a video from a Dr. Leonard Coldell. And he was referring to cancer as toxins, and that claim itself has been immediately debunked, and there's a lot of these have been debunked for quite a while now.
Yeah, I understand there's 3 posts on my Facebook from March that I tried to delete. That could have been one of them. Cholesterol and cholesterol are 2 different things. So I am heavily against vegetable oils. Okay, so I am with good fats in the diet. So, and that doesn't equate to cholesterol levels in the bloodstream. So good fats are really healthy for you, butters opposed to margarines, and olive oils opposed to vegetable oils. Now, this has been proven, and I believe that it's time that we take those vegetable oils off the market shelves. They're not very healthy for us, and they don't add to any to our health. They take away from our health, and largely then it goes to show in our hospital in the results of the people that we bring into the hospital. So that is one reason why I do that. But on the other hand, if I have posted about vaccines, I think it's more to I've never done a vaccine post per se. I'm more about mandates. I think the mandate brought in through the governments was not called for. A lot of people lost their jobs. 100,000 businesses lost their businesses. Now, this was not a war. This was an airborne virus, and our economy collapsed because of it. So I believe that mandates were unnecessary when we took the correct measures of closing our borders. So I think that we stopped any continuance of any COVID coming into our country. We had it under control. We were very on top of it. And then to go and lock people down, keep them in their homes, stop them from shopping, stop them from working, I think was the wrong way of handling that when we had it in hand, I believe. So,
Miss Ledger, unfortunately we're out of time, but thank you so much, and of course we'll look forward to
Michael. Daniel, sorry.
And of course we'll look forward to seeing you on the campaign trail.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me today.
Finally tonight, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese had a moment he'd rather forget. Too bad there were plenty of cameras about. The PM was seen tripping on stage at the Mining and Energy Union conference on Thursday. Despite some gasps from the audience, the Prime Minister said he was all sweet and continued on. No doubt Mr Albanese will be hoping that's the only trip up he has this election campaign. And that's Firstline for this Friday. I'm Daniel Pizarro. Thank you so much for your company. I'll be back next week with more news from the election campaign. Until then, have a great weekend. I'll see you soon. Good night.